Alright guys, that bow is starting to enter your viewing well.
Yes, it
You'll notice
is.
that metal strapping on there. Metal strapping, two purposes. Gave extra strength in the water, and it also saved that captain some money on his insurance. And we have that tow post. That tow post, guys, stands about 5 feet off the deck. That's where you would see mules, horses, oxen, 30 miles through the canal. They're seeing it before you. Behind that is that chain locker. If you guys notice the holes on top, that's where that chain would come out. That anchor would sit right on top. Those are Hassais. And behind that, you're going to see this big hole. It's a mast hole. It held 110-foot tall white pine. They used pine because it was a lot more flexible than what oak was. And there was two on this ship. We have it all on the back of our shirts on what it looked like. That little tiny hole behind it, bilge pump, that's where those guys were trying to get all that water. Obviously, it didn't help them this time. And we have a cargo hatch. This cargo hatch, that's where they would load and unload that high-grade iron ore. It took them about a week. And those guys made $1 a day. They used buckets and wheelbarrows because they didn't have modern equipment. Yeah, cheap. And then the next, you guys are going to notice the center. It's called the centerboard hatch. It was on a pivot system. They could lower it in the deep water and raise it when they went through the canals. All these ships were like this, kind of unique. Even back then, they had that ingenuity to do that. Notice that this broken up part of the decking, you might see a telephone pole looking thing down there. That's the big boom. They just broke this deck up, didn't care what they did to the deck. They did it to put light down in there because back then they didn't have any submersible lights. Somebody asked me the other day about a lantern. I didn't have the heart to break it to them, you know. And you're underwater, but it was a little one. It was a wee one. And then we have the second hatch. You may notice a little barrel behind it. That barrel's put there by some divers. It's not relevant to this shipwreck, but it does show you how big the shipwreck is. And then behind that, you guys are going to notice this 20 by 20 foot section. This is where that cabin trunk stood. They never did find that cabin trunk. I think somebody's got a pretty good camper or sauna somewhere, but it popped off like a cork. You'll notice the beams below, 4 foot below the deck, 4 feet above the deck. That's where the captain's quarters were, the galley. And then behind that, you guys can notice this little companionway. It has a little stick ladder. That's where the guys could get around on the boat. I think there were sleeping quarters for 2 in here as well. Then you're going to notice this rudder post, fully intact rudder, and then that stern rail. So the ship sits like